Okay, so we are at 12:02, so let's get it started. Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Sidlansky, and I'm the founder of Lakewood Advisors. I wanted to thank you all for joining myself and my colleague, Haley Hazlitt, as we go through the Parent's Guide to College Planning. We're going to be discussing college planning and what you as a parent can do at different stages of your child's life. So this presentation is going to be about 20 to 25 minutes long. We are going to leave time at the end for questions. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. We will answer them at the end. Also, if you would like a copy of this presentation, you can email Haley and I after the presentation, and we'll be happy to send you some. Okay. So before we start with any type of planning, it's really important to understand your goals as a parent. We're going to talk about how goals are important and how everything really starts with understanding you and your goals. Today's webinar, since everybody is at a different stage of their child's life, we want to make sure that we can add value to you regardless if your child is just born or maybe a teenager. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it down by different stages. And those stages are going to be newborn, elementary school, and then high school. And so again, we're going to go through each one of these stages of your child's life, and we'll be able to share with you things that you could be doing as a parent to better prepare yourself for their education. It's important for us, like we said, as we go through this, to really first understand your goals. And for us, that is really for any type of planning engagement we get into where we start. It's really important for you and your spouse to have a conversation now and understand what your goal is when it comes to your child's education. Do you want to fully fund your child's education? Do you want your child to have skin in the game? How do you want to contribute? Is it a fixed dollar amount, a percentage of the cost? You may not know that yet, but it's important to understand really what your goal in a perfect scenario would be. Also, if you have multiple children, do you want to provide an equal opportunity for all of them? Right? What happens if one gets a scholarship? What happens if one doesn't decide to go to school? Having these conversations up front is critically important as you think about planning for your child's college education. And then just as important, how does this impact your other goals as a family? You may have goals of financial independence. You may have goals of buying a second home, taking vacations. Financial planning is a zero-sum game, so these dollars that are going to be allocated to your child's education are going to have to come from somewhere. So as you consider this, really try to think about where this lies on your priority list as a family and how this is going to impact your goals. Okay, so now if you've had that conversation and you're aligned about what you want to do and really what that goal is, let's talk about where we can start. So the good news is with a newborn child, it's pretty straightforward in that we want you to start with a 529 plan. You can see on this slide, there's a lot of really good reasons why a 529 plan makes sense. Just going to focus on one of them, which is the tax advantaged investing. All that means is that if you were to invest, say, $10,000 in a 529 account, and that account grew to $100,000, that $90,000 of growth would be tax-free in a 529 account as long as you used it for qualified education expenses. Now, if that money sat outside the 529, you would obviously owe taxes on that growth. You also, depending on your state, may get a deduction on your taxes for the contributions you make into the 529. So the 529 is the best choice for many reasons. I'm not going to go through all these benefits, but a couple things that I want to add about 529s that are important, especially when you consider picking the 529 account. For us, we really prefer if you first look at your state's direct plan. And there's two main reasons for this. Number one, direct plans are going to be less expensive. And so generally speaking, the direct plan will be a very low cost plan versus something called a broker sold plan. A broker sold plan is something that you can buy at a credit union, a bank, a brokerage house. Unfortunately, in New York, we've seen fees as high as 5% on these types of plans. So we want you to steer clear of those 529 plans when they're broker sold because of the fees. Also, oftentimes those tax deductions I talked about are only applicable for the direct state plan, not for the broker sold plan. So those are the tax deductions on the money you put into your plan on a yearly basis. That's not for the tax-free growth. So those are really two reasons why you want to stick with a direct plan. If you're not sure about your state and what plans they use, you can go to savingsforcollege.com and figure out which are the direct plans and which are the broker sold. The other final thing is that each one of your child should have a 529 account, right? Each child is going to have their own time horizon for school. And so that it's important that they each have their own 529 account. All right. So hopefully I've convinced you now that a 529 account is the right account for you. Let's talk about how to contribute to this account. And so for us, again, starting with a newborn, a lump sum is really the best way to start. We prefer a lump sum because it gives you the ability to have the longest time horizon for that money to grow. We talked about with a 529 account, the biggest advantage is that tax-free growth. Well, if we think about investing from newborn to age 18 or maybe up to 22 throughout your child's college education, you have 18 to 22 years of investing. We want you to take advantage of that growth potential. You can do that by putting in a lump sum early. So now, how much can you do? The good news is each parent can contribute $17,000 per year. So for a couple, that is $34,000 a year without having to file a gift tax return. Now, you can do more than $34,000, but you will have to file a gift tax return. But just remember that for most of us, all the gift tax return is really just a ledger or a filing. There's going to be no actual tax that's due. The only time you would owe a tax with a gift that you give to somebody else is if you've gone over your lifetime limit in gifting. And that lifetime limit is north of $12 million now. So for most of us, we don't have to worry about that. So again, you can do more than $34,000, but you just have to make sure that you are filing a gift tax return. So we understand that for everyone, doing a lump sum may not be feasible. So what I'm going to do is, well, the good news is first is that all is not lost and we have another strategy, but I'm going to hand it off to Haley so she can kind of discuss that strategy and how you can use it to effectively put yourself ahead for your child's college planning.
Thank you. All right. So yes, if a lump sum isn't feasible, or maybe you're doing a combination, the next best thing is to select a monthly contribution amount that you can commit to, otherwise known as periodically investing. The core tenet of that is just the sooner you start investing, the more time you have for your money to grow, your college fund to grow. And it's going to happen through the power of long-term compounding. And otherwise said as start early, small contributions add up. And the best way to do this is to put your investing on autopilot, set up an automatic reoccurring contribution to your 529 account to make sure you're hitting your monthly goal, your annual goal as far as savings. But when we look at saving for college, we want to tie that to a specific goal, whether it's paying for a particular tuition or a set amount per year. We work with you to help you come to that decision, that goal. But I have a few examples here. And so this first table that we're looking at is if you were to start when your child was a newborn, from age 0 to 18, how much would you need to save per month to fund certain levels of institution, different costs at the target amount. So we'll go through this here. And so our first example is UCLA, for example, for a public in-state university cost of attendance. And so we have this at $35,561 per year, and that's including tuition, fees, room and board, textbooks, transportation, and all-in cost of attendance. And for public in-state universities, we are happy if you want to save 100% of that cost of attendance in a 529, as costs can fluctuate, and we're not overly concerned with it being overfunded, saving for the public in-state level. So if we were to want to target paying for 100% of UCLA in this case, and given your investments are returning 6% compounded monthly, you would need to save $723 a month from age 0 through age 18 to achieve 100% paid out of the 529. And so for our next example, we have Penn State as our out-of-state university cost. And of course, as parents, especially when your child is very young, you don't know where they're going to go to college, right? Or what their academic inclinations are going to be. But it can be a good thing to think about funding, paying for out-of-state tuition, especially if you live in a smaller state or there's less universities in your state. So looking at this cost, we have it all in at $56,532 a year. And accounting for a little bit of that unknown, our target amount to pay out of the 529 is 90%. And to achieve that, under our investment assumptions, you would need to save $1,035 a month to pay 90% out of the 529 for the cost of attendance. And then our last example here, we have Cornell University for our private university cost of attendance example at $83,296 per year. And for private university, again, early on, you may not know where your child's academic strengths lie. And also there are things that may reduce cost of attendance down the line, such as merit aid. And so for private universities, we typically advise saving around 80% of the cost of attendance, not wanting to overfund possibly. And to achieve that target 80% paid out of the 529, we are looking at saving $1,355 per month from age 0 to 18 here. So on our next slide, we have a visual to put in perspective, starting at different ages, starting at birth, age 6, age 12. These contributions amount here are $100 a month in the blue, $250 a month in the teal, and $500 a month in the green. And so you can see here that starting as early as possible, of course, is going to give you the most time to accumulate contributions, but also give the most amount of time for your investments to compound and grow. But that being said, you can absolutely start. It's never too late to start. And so our next table of examples is if you were to start saving for college at the beginning of elementary school. And so here we're starting a bit later, still on the earlier side, but age 6, we have our same 3 college examples, and we are looking to fund the same amount of college. So what is going to change here is the amount you need to save per month if you were to start at age 6 through 18 to get that same level of college funded. And so we have here for UCLA, our public in-state option, to achieve 100% paid out of the 529, we would need to save $1,053 a month. And so, of course, you need to save more per month if you're starting later. In this case, it's going to be about 45% more, but doable. If that is your goal, it is within reach. You just need to save more per month. Similarly, for our example for Penn State, our out-of-state university, we're looking at also upping that contribution respectively per month, about 45% to $1,507 a month. to get to that 90% target paid out of the 529. And lastly, for Cornell University, our private university example, also needing to save about 45% more as compared to our newborn example. And that is going to be $1,974 a month to achieve 80% of the cost of attendance paid out of the 529. And so the takeaway here is it's never too late to start. Absolutely anything that you want to put towards your child's education, I'm sure is welcome by them. But if you have specific targets, specific goals, an amount you want to pay towards your kids' college, you just will need to up your contributions if you start later.
Great, thank you, Haley. Yeah, it's so the message is all is not lost, but obviously the earlier the better, and you can see how that's a significant dollar difference starting in elementary school. So one thing before we get to high school, I just want to talk about investing and not being too conservative. And so the good thing about the 529 accounts is they usually have age-based options similar to you probably have in your 401k an age or retirement target date fund. These will start out more aggressive and then become more conservative as your child gets older and closer to school. But what I want to just really emphasize is not being too conservative, because as you can see here from this slide, small percentage differences in your overall annualized return can really add up. So this example shows $100,000 invested at birth and then invested for 18 years. If there is a 4% return, you're about $202,000. Now, if you just get a 6% return, so only 2% more annualized per year, you're up to almost an extra $83,000 in growth. And as we saw from that last example, that's almost a full year tuition at one of the most expensive schools in the country, just for taking a little bit more risk. So what does that mean? That means when your child's young, you should definitely be the most aggressive. And then, as your child gets older, you might not want to put the brakes on so much. You have to see, really where you're trending, how much you have saved. But, staying a little bit more aggressive can really pay off in terms of how much of the school tuition that you can afford in the long run. All right, so now let's move on to high school. Again, you're almost there. Well, there's a few outcomes in high school that can happen. First, you saved enough. Congrats. If you've saved enough and you're in an age-based option, well, then the portfolio should be automatically reducing the exposure to stocks, more exposure to bonds and cash. You want to check. And again, if you've had that full amount paid for maybe say a state school, I would advise that you take all risk off the table and then just make sure your portfolio is conservative so you don't have to risk losing any of that principal. Now, another scenario that we get all the time from parents is what happens if I save too much? The good news is you have a lot of options. The first, as you probably already know, a 529 can pass along to a sibling or even a grandchild. And what I can tell you is we have some clients who use 529s as a legacy building tool, in that they will purposely overfund the 529, leaving money in there when their child graduates college, with the idea of passing that along to that child's future grandchild. And so if you think about it, if there's $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 left over, that money will get an extra 10, maybe 15 years to grow. And so what you've done is really just supercharge the compounding in that account and really given your child a head start with possibly, funding almost all or a large portion of their child's education. So you can pass it along to siblings and grandchildren once. Now, another thing that's relatively new, the Secure Act 2.0 in 2024 will allow for up to $35,000 to be moved into a Roth IRA. And now there are some stipulations and income ramification or income specifications that you need to meet, but there is a $35,000 lifetime limit that you can move over into a Roth IRA. Just a great way for you to be able to jumpstart your child's retirement plan by moving that into a Roth 401k. So that's a really cool option. Also, too, of note, if you have too much, or maybe your child receives a scholarship and now you're overfunded, that amount can be withdrawn penalty-free. You'll still owe taxes on the growth of those funds, but you will not have to pay the 10% penalty. And then lastly, it can be used for all types of education. So maybe if your child is planning on going to graduate school or medical school or law school, you can use those funds for that type of schooling. So now we talked about kind of those positive type scenarios. What if you haven't saved enough? How can you best prepare your child? I'm going to hand it off to Haley to give you some things that you can do to best prepare yourself and your child if you haven't saved enough.
Yeah, so thank you. So yes, if you haven't saved enough, or you've known the entire time that you're going to contribute X amount per year, and there's going to be a difference that your child, your student will need to take on in loans, how can you best prepare them? It's really important in this case, of course, to be realistic with your child and be upfront with them, be transparent about what you as your family expect to contribute to their college costs per year, if anything, and let them know so they can take that into account when they're researching colleges and when they're deciding on where to apply. And when they do apply, it's critical that they incorporate schools with different costs of attendances, from community college, if that makes sense, state schools, and so on. Make sure they don't only apply to really high cost private schools, because that can turn into a situation where they may be forced to take on a large amount of student loans if they were to go to a school. And so what you can do as your child is considering taking on student loans is show them what that debt means. And so there's tools on studentaid.gov, loan simulation, what your payments may be post-grad. We also like to look at what a paycheck might be, and you can do that on the ADP paycheck calculator just to see how much, when they're post-grad, they may actually take home, and what portion of that would a potential student loan payment be. And also to be mindful of, we typically consider that student loan debt, the monthly payment starts to become excessive, starts to become more of a burden when it's 10% of your gross salary per month. And so if they are making $60,000 a year, $5,000 a month, that would be if their student loan payment was $500 or more, it's going to start to be difficult to carry at that range. And also another rule of thumb is just that for undergraduate degrees, debt shouldn't exceed the expected first year salary post-grad. So you don't want your child to take on a large amount of student loans that is going to hinder their ability to move through life. And that's not realistic for the salary that they're expecting post-grad to be able to actually pay that down. And overall, for yourself and for your child, resist the urge to forfeit your future. We don't want you taking out Parent Plus loans when they don't make sense, or taking out private loans and forfeiting what you need to save for your retirement. And we don't want your child to become overly burdened with student loans that it's impacting their future. So this is the time to be upfront and to make smart decisions on the future.
Great, Haley. Yeah, it's resist the urge, right, to really succumb to that peer pressure and maybe take on too much debt for that school or that alma mater that maybe you've had your heart set on. So we are almost at the end here. I just want to quickly give you a few takeaways, recap our conversation today. Number one, have that conversation upfront with your spouse. Make sure you're on the same page. I know oftentimes your vision or your view or your goals can be shaped by your own, and it can be something that causes some conflict where maybe one spouse had college paid for, one didn't. And so have that conversation up front, make sure that you're aligned on that vision. With the 529 is the best vehicle to start. We would like you to start with a lump sum if you can, but if you can't, stay consistent with that periodic investing. And as Haley showed before, it can be done. You just need to kind of understand what you're aiming for, and you can see really what that will pay for in the long run. Also, stay aggressive with your investing, especially at the start, but then even as you hit elementary and middle school, you don't want to de-risk too early and give up some of those possible future returns. Be upfront with your child, especially with your willingness and your expectation to contribute. I think it's really important that a child goes into this knowing what their parents are going to contribute, what they can contribute, and why that's the case. And so having that upfront conversation with your child is important. If that child is going to take on some debt, or there's different varying levels of debt, it's really difficult for a 17 or 18-year-old to understand how that debt will impact them. So try to use some of those tools like the ADP calculator. Show them if they make a job making $60,000 a year and they're going to be paying $2,000 a month in student loan debt, that they're basically not going to have any money to live off of. So try to put it in terms that they can understand to help them make, a smarter decision. And then the last thing, Haley had kind of alluded to this before, but put your mask on first. We always say is what you hear on an airplane, you can't help anybody else unless you're taken care of. And the same goes for your own financial stability. Don't forfeit your own future for putting your child into maybe a too expensive school. Ultimately, I don't think any parent wants their child to have to or have to go back to their child to rely on them for financial need later in life. The child can always borrow for their education. You can't borrow for retirement and your financial stability. So make sure that you put your mask on first. So that concludes our presentation for today. I wanted to thank everybody for joining. Hopefully you found it impactful. If you would like a copy of this presentation, you can email myself or Haley. Also, if you ever want to talk, you can book a complimentary planning session on our website. But let me look to see if we have any questions. And it doesn't look like we have any questions. So again, thank you for coming today. You can always reach out to us, and we appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar in the third quarter. We're going to discuss estate planning. All right, take care. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.